This podcast is sponsored by IQ Bar.
I've got good news and bad news. Here's the bad news. Most protein bars are packed with sugar and unpronounceable ingredients. The good news? There's a better option. I'm Will, and I created IQ Bar plant protein bars to empower doers like you with clean, delicious, low-sugar brain and body fuel. IQ Bars are packed with 12 grams of protein, brain nutrients like magnesium and lion's mane, and zero weird stuff. And right now, you can get 20% off all IQ Bar products, plus free shipping. Try our delicious IQ Bar sampler pack with 7 plant protein bars, 4 hydration mixes, and 4 enhanced coffee sticks. Clean ingredients, amazing taste, and you'll love how you feel. Refuel smarter, hydrate harder, caffeinate larger with IQ Bar.
Go to eatiqbar.com and enter code BAR20 to get 20% off all IQ Bar products plus free shipping. Again, go to eatiqbar.com and enter code BAR20. This podcast is sponsored by IQ Bar.
I've got good news and bad news. Here's the bad news. Most protein bars are packed with sugar and unpronounceable ingredients. The good news? There's a better option. I'm Will, and I created IQ Bar plant protein bars to empower doers like you with clean, delicious, low-sugar brain and body fuel. IQ Bars are packed with 12 grams of protein, brain nutrients like magnesium and lion's mane, and zero weird stuff. And right now, you can get 20% off all IQ Bar products, plus free shipping. Try our delicious IQ Bar sampler pack with 7 plant protein bars, 4 hydration mixes, and 4 enhanced coffee sticks. Clean ingredients, amazing taste, and you'll love how you feel. Refuel smarter, hydrate harder, caffeinate larger with IQ Bar.
Go to eatiqbar.com and enter code BAR20 to get 20% off all IQ Bar products plus free shipping. Again, go to eatiqbar.com and enter code BAR20.
The Jeep brand has always stood for American freedom. Now with our Freedom of Choice pricing program, you can choose your offer. Cash incentives or employee pricing for all. Hurry into your local dealer today for details. Jeep, there's only one. Offer valid on select 2024 and 2025 Jeep brand vehicles for non-FCA employees and retirees. $200 admin fee applies. Not all buyers and lessees will qualify. Restrictions apply. Not combinable with other offers. Ends 4/30/2025. Jeep is a registered trademark of FCA US LLC.
This week on Unforgotten.
My name's Brad Golson. I am a distant relative of Mary Faye Hunter.
You know, I think there are a few theories out there of what could have happened. But you pretty much nailed what you think probably happened to her.
She pretty much dreamed of, having a husband, having kids. And when you think about those things on a daily basis, and then all of a sudden someone does show some interest in you, what are they going to do with it once they find it? That's the question. Are they going to tell anybody? Well, then they're going to have to admit that they covered up a suicide.
So I think you did a great job of bringing her to life, really, is what I think you did with the book.
She's not just a rumor. She's not just a photograph from a newspaper. There's a lot more to her.
Hey everyone, this is Sellers.
And this is Stormy.
And this is Unforgotten,
where each episode will highlight unsolved missing, murdered, and suspicious death cases in Alabama in order to raise awareness and hopefully obtain some answers for victims and their families.
Please remember that any individual referenced in the podcast should be considered innocent until found guilty in a court of law, and any opinions or views expressed in the podcast are solely those of participants. Listener discretion is advised, as some of the content discussed in the podcast may contain violence or graphic descriptions and may not be suitable for all audiences.
And now for Season 2's Episode 2, Mary Faye Hunter, an interview with Brad Golson. Hey guys, welcome back. We have a great interview to share with you. But before we do, just a couple quick things to mention. As many of you may know, April is National Child Abuse Prevention Month. It is also Sexual Assault Awareness Month. And actually, there are several causes and interest awarenesses for April, but just a few others are Autism Awareness Month, Alcohol Awareness Month, and National Volunteer Month. last year at this time of year, we had an episode where we discussed autism awareness. And so I will put a link to that episode in our description. And also just a shout out, big thank you to all those who have volunteered to help ACCA and to the volunteers everywhere, really. And with that, we'll include some links for victims and families or anyone interested in the resources in our episode description. Also, because we recorded this the week before you're listening to it, this past week was also National Crime Victims' Rights Week. It's an important time to call attention to victims of violent crime nationwide. But in our world at the ACCA, particularly for the efforts in Alabama with over 300 cold cases that are listed between the various agencies anyway. So with Sellers being our awesome Bama local gal, she has been very busy talking with media and attending vigils. This past week was such an experience, and we're honored to take part in the events to advocate for our Alabama victims and their families. She's going to talk a little more about this in our next episode, so I'll leave it at that. And this is a good transition for here. Our Ms. Sellers has been running her buns off this week. And so, as such, it's my turn to present this week's episode to you solo. I mentioned we have a great interview to share with you, and I was fortunate enough to be able to chat with investigative journalist Brad Golson, who, as was mentioned in the last episode featuring Mary Faye Hunter, is the co-author of the book, What Happened to Mary Faye Hunter, a novel based on a true story. Now, for those who haven't listened to episode 2, the last episode on Mary Faye, I suggest you go back and listen before going further. It will help with understanding the content, but there could be a few spoilers in the episode if you don't know much about the case yet. And even if you do, just continue to listen, which is great. We suggest you go back and read the book too. It is a very interesting look into the case. Okay, without further ado, here's the interview with Brad Golson. It's great having you here, and I guess the first thing I would like to do is have you kind of introduce yourself. So, Brad, who are you?
Well, first of all, just thank you for having me on. Any kind of attention for this case is well received. I think it deserves the attention. Probably doesn't get enough of the attention that it does deserve. But my name's Brad Golson. I am a distant relative of Mary Faye Hunter. Specifically, I'm a fourth cousin.
Oh wow!
Right. Yeah, I've been involved a little bit with genealogy. It fascinates me, and I've heard about Mary Faye Hunter ever since I was a child. I remember my mom. She's related to her. It's on her side of the family, and off and on we heard about this case, and as a child, it really didn't register to me, but later on, as things just sort of fell into place, as fate would have it, I actually met Mary Faye's nephew in middle school, and we became friends. And
I was going to ask you about that. I could tell so I watched his interview with you on YouTube.
Yes.
So I could tell that you knew each other fairly well, but so middle school, you've known each other since, huh?
Right. And I had no idea that he was Mary Faye's nephew. I really didn't know. I just knew his last name was Hunter, and I knew I had some Hunters on my side of the family, but I did not know that I was related to him until probably a few years later in high school.
Oh, wow. That's crazy.
Yeah.
So, I guess, so you're an investigative journalist by trade, is that correct?
Yeah. Initially, being a journalist, print journalism, that was my first goal. That was my passion. I did it quite a bit in high school. I was on the newspaper staff, and I worked a little bit for the Decatur Daily. And as I went to college, I was also on the newspaper staff there. And then I just sort of I got to where I was a little bit burned out with print, and decided to go the broadcast route. And after I got out of there, I moved on to television. So I've been working in television since 2003,
Oh,
and just done a little bit of everything, directing,
any
producing, that kind of thing.
okay? Anything I know?
Well,
Maybe.
you probably saw my documentary on Mary Faye.
Right.
That's probably one thing you do know. I've worked. I work for Jamie Cooper. He's unless you're from the Tennessee Valley, you may not have heard of him, but he's sort of a local legend around here. He had a very popular segment in Huntsville that he did for years, and he's
Okay.
actually still doing it. They brought him back, and he's still doing that segment. It's called the Country Rovers.
Oh,
So he's very well known, and I've worked for him ever since 2003, and he's quite a character. But that's another story.
awesome. So before we actually get into the case and the story, you actually partnered with somebody to author the book. Is that Glenda Yarbrough? Is that how you say her name?
Yes, Glenda Yarbrough. That's another one of those things that, as fate would have it, type of interesting backstories. Is she actually wrote a book back when I was much younger. I might have been a teenager, and actually, I have a tie to the case that she wrote about. My grandmother was a babysitter to the man that actually, it's a very well known case in Decatur. He murdered his wife, put her under a fish pond that he built himself in the backyard, and then he needed a babysitter for his children. And my grandmother was a babysitter for him, and no one knew what happened to the wife. He just said that she ran away, and for about 3 years, he got away with that story. And I used to come over to that house. I used to spend time with his kids. My grandmother would watch me and his kids. If you go back to my family history, there's just a lot of these weird things. My great grandfather, he was murdered.
Oh,
Yeah, he owned a jewelry store over in Ardmore, and he got murdered. He was 29 years old. He was seeing another woman, and this man caught him, and he stabbed him right in the heart,
oh my.
killed him like instantly. But now my family, being embarrassed about it, they told a different story for many years. So my mother, she had always heard a different story, that he had been robbed and he had been stabbed because, yeah, it was his jewelry store. He was being robbed. They were taking his money, and they decided to kill him. And that was it. That was always the story that was regurgitated. And I finally decided, you know what? This is an interesting story. I'm gonna go to the archives and see what I can find out about it. I wasn't questioning the story. I just wanted to know more about it. It was like, this happened in 1929, but there'll be newspaper articles about it. And I found it, and then I found the real story. And I told my mom, and she was like, "What?" And then she told my aunts about it, and they couldn't believe it. And um, my mom's grandmother, they were very close, and she felt a little betrayed. She's like, "I can't believe she didn't tell me the truth." I'm like, "Well, she was trying to protect you." So the infamous fish pond in the backyard, used to feed the fish in the backyard, not knowing what was underneath it.
Wow.
So she actually wrote a very popular book about the case. It did really well, and she actually came on the morning show that I direct, that Jamie Cooper and his wife host. And during this time, I was right in the middle of Mary Faye Hunter's case, and I was doing a lot of research on that, and just seeing her on the show just kind of got me thinking that, with Glenda's experience and her voice, because she was alive during this time period, and she knows a lot about 1960s South, and
Mm-hmm.
I thought she could bring a voice to Mary Faye Hunter that was desperately needed. And so I contacted her after the show and told her who I was, and right away she was very interested, and it just sort of went from there.
Wow. So you had a lot of coincidences and little
Yeah, you wouldn't believe.
relationships there that kind of all came to a head, huh?
Yeah, it's like it's just fate. Like it was just meant to be. I was meant to be a part of this somehow.
Yeah, yeah. That's awesome. Well, I think Mary Faye's very lucky to have had all these people pay attention. I wish it was much sooner, but
Exactly, yes.
yeah.
This podcast is sponsored by IQ Bar.
I've got good news and bad news. Here's the bad news. Most protein bars are packed with sugar and unpronounceable ingredients. The good news? There's a better option. I'm Will, and I created IQ Bar plant protein bars to empower doers like you with clean, delicious, low-sugar brain and body fuel. IQ bars are packed with 12 grams of protein, brain nutrients like magnesium and lion's mane, and zero weird stuff. And right now, you can get 20% off all IQ Bar products, plus free shipping. Try our delicious IQ Bar sampler pack with 7 plant protein bars, 4 hydration mixes, and 4 enhanced coffee sticks. Clean ingredients, amazing taste, and you'll love how you feel. Refuel smarter, hydrate harder, caffeinate larger with IQ Bar.
Go to eatiqbar.com and enter code BAR20 to get 20% off all IQ Bar products, plus free shipping. Again, go to eatiqbar.com and enter code BAR20. This podcast is sponsored by IQ Bar.
I've got good news and bad news. Here's the bad news. Most protein bars are packed with sugar and unpronounceable ingredients. The good news? There's a better option. I'm Will, and I created IQ Bar plant protein bars to empower doers like you with clean, delicious, low-sugar brain and body fuel. IQ bars are packed with 12 grams of protein, brain nutrients like magnesium and lion's mane, and zero weird stuff. And right now, you can get 20% off all IQ Bar products, plus free shipping. Try our delicious IQ Bar sampler pack with 7 plant protein bars, 4 hydration mixes, and 4 enhanced coffee sticks. Clean ingredients, amazing taste, and you'll love how you feel. Refuel smarter, hydrate harder, caffeinate larger with IQ Bar.
Go to eatiqbar.com and enter code BAR20 to get 20% off all IQ Bar products, plus free shipping. Again, go to eatiqbar.com and enter code BAR20.
Ram trucks have always powered American freedom. Now with our Freedom of Choice pricing program, you can choose your offer, cash incentives, or employee pricing for all. Hurry into your local dealer today for details, because nothing stops America and nothing stops Ram. Offer valid on select 2024 and 2025 Rams for non-FCA employees and retirees. $200 admin fee applies. Not all buyers and lessees will qualify. Restrictions apply. Not combinable with other offers. Ends 4/30/25. Ram is a registered trademark of FCA US LLC.
Well, now I know that how you know Jamie, but when did you actually work with him at all and research on the book, or is it just kind of a thing that you guys were just friends and you kind of how involved was he in your research, I guess is what I'm trying to get at.
Well, the way it worked out was, there was never any intention to even write a book.
Yeah.
What happened was Jamie, I'd seen somewhere online that he was looking to make a film on Mary Faye's life. And, his father being Mary Faye's brother, and the sort of impact that had on his father definitely impacted his family. And,
Sure.
I had never even talked to him about Mary Faye. I mean, we were just friends.
Wow.
It was never a subject that ever came up when we were kids going into high school. We kind of lost touch. See, Jamie, he was sort of known locally as a sort of a film prodigy. He started working in film at a very young age.
Oh.
And, he was going to be the next Steven Spielberg. He was going to go to L.A. and make it big. And so he did actually move to California, I believe, before he was 20 years old and got into the movie industry. So, yeah, we lost touch. We reconnected on Facebook after I saw that he was interested in making that film.
Right.
And so I just contacted him. And I said, because I was under the impression that he knew what happened. Like the case was solved, and I didn't know, because I was always interested. I was like, gee, I would like to know what happened to her. But as it turned out, the film was going to be centered more on the impact that her death had on the family, and he was still looking for answers. But he said, look, if there's anything you can do to find out, because he knew that I was in the journalism field, and he knew that I had sources, and I knew how to get information, and it, we looked at old newspaper articles. We knew that there was a retired detective that was still looking into her case, but it's still not gotten all the answers. So my first step was to contact Bob Hancock, and from there it just turned into a brand new investigation, sort of starting from scratch.
Gotcha. Okay. Wow. So just from what I've researched on the case, I know a little bit more than probably a lot of the audience does. But yeah, I noticed that Bob seemed to know a lot about the case that nobody has ever really heard. Maybe theories that he had, but maybe weren't widely accepted.
Well, yes, there was an article published by the Decatur Daily. I believe it was back in 2011. It was either 2011 or 2010. And they were just, sort of doing an update on the case. And Bob, back in the 60s and 70s, Bob's name was just all over the newspaper. He was like a legend. He worked for the state Alabama Bureau of Investigation.
Okay.
He worked on so many cases that are well known around here, and they just sort of keep in touch with Bob on whatever he's working on.
Sure.
Of course, by the time I contacted him, his health had really gone down. I mean, he had gotten to where he was on dialysis. That's 3 days a week.
Right.
He's in his mid 80s. Mind still very sharp, great memory, and that's kind of what I had to rely on, because we didn't have any case files, we didn't have any evidence. It had all been lost, and so that was our foundation, was using what Bob knew, what he remembered, and that was enough to get us going in the right direction.
Gotcha. Yeah, I did notice. I was just as a side note, I was going to ask if you had been able to ever obtain any records on the case at all, because one of the things that we did try to do is obtain records, and
Right.
they've approved me to have them, but there isn't any to have.
Right. It's if there is any, nobody knows where they are, or they're not telling. I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I don't think there's people out there that are deliberately hiding information. Now you can make a pretty good argument based on what I have found, that there could be a little bit of motivation for that. But I tend to think that a lot of things were misplaced over the years. There was not a lot of foresight, I'll say that, like there is in some of these other jurisdictions, like in California and New York, where you have more of a budget. You have a cold case unit, an independent staff that can look at these cases, that has the foresight of DNA, what's coming up in the future, and let's hold on to this stuff, because there's no time limit, there's no statute of to worry about for these cases.
It is. It's one of our big. We have several pet peeves, but
Right.
but of course, like I'm sure you understand and what we've been talking about, but time was not in our favor back then because there was just the processes were different back then. Even when they meant well, even when there wasn't any kind of conspiracy or any, neglect in the situation, just the record keeping itself, it was just completely a different process back
Yes.
then. People looked at everything differently than they do now.
Yeah,
And
you're looking at smaller counties that have smaller budgets. You're not looking at big counties that have lots of inventory, lots of places to put these cases. You're looking at limited amount of space, and when you run out of
coincidentally, just so you and I will be the first one to actually discuss this, but I had been working on trying to get an answer whether the Decatur police still considered this an open case and was working on the records. And so they had written back to me stating that, they couldn't fulfill my request, basically, even though they had, like I said, they had permission to do so. They had no records they could find in regards to it. So when I wrote back, I just said, hey, just one more question. Do you guys still consider this an open case? Or is this, whatever? And so she actually wrote to the captain herself, the person that was answering my emails. And this is what he had to say. He says, we have no record of this case in our RMS. I did find an article that talked about the case that specifically mentioned investigator Bob Hancock, who, of course, we just talked about, as the main investigator. Hancock was an Alabama state trooper who later went to the ABI, the investigative agency of troopers at the time. The area her body was discovered was not in the city of Decatur. It was in Flint City or Morgan County, depending on the exact location she was found. I suggest you contact the State Bureau of Investigation in Huntsville. And then he sent me the copy of the article and said to let him know if we had any questions, which I thought was pretty expedient because I only sent the email back to her about an hour before we started recording this. So,
right. Well, that sounds very similar to the answers that I got. It was, yeah, we don't know a lot. They don't know anything about the case. They don't have anything to reference it other than what you just said, a newspaper article. That's sort of all that they have to look at. If you go to the state, they'll say, well, no, you got to go to Decatur, that this is their case. And then Decatur will say, well, no, this is a state case.
Yeah. And that's pretty common too. Yeah.
Yeah, then nobody really wants responsibility for it because to be quite frank, it's embarrassing when you don't know where the case files are, and no one wants to say, yes, this is ours, and we don't know where they are, and then they'll also say, look, I wasn't even born when this happened, so they don't like for their agency to look bad, which, I understand, it's not technically their fault.
Right.
They weren't around, but this is their agency. They're representing them. Someone needs to come forward for some a little bit of accountability. I think is at least in order.
I agree.
This is not just a manila folder. Okay. This was a big case. We're talking about boxes of evidence and folders. You can't just not know where those are. You can't just say, oh, well, maybe they're in a dark corner. Well, I can tell you, I've been down to the basement in the archives building, and Bob had been down there too. He and a host of other former law enforcement. And he went down there before me, and they tore that place apart, couldn't find anything. And then I went down there being stubborn, thinking, okay, well, maybe I can find it, and this is just me versus, 12 other guys that couldn't find it. But I'm going to say, well, at least I looked, at least I tried. I spent, 2 weeks down there and couldn't find anything either. So I feel pretty good saying it's not down there.
Yeah. Well, and, to be honest, if it is with the State Bureau of Investigation, chances are we're not going to find it either.
No, and they're not going to let us look for it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But, one of the things that We always try, when we actually are talking directly to the agencies and we're able to get their attention enough where they'll discuss the case a little bit with us, is, we always try to tell them, especially in these old cases. I mean, this is 1987. This is a long, long time ago. This isn't like it happened last year and you're going to get embarrassed because you did something terrible
Sure.
that screwed up the case. This is a whole different system, a whole different era. This is a whole different department, really, than it was.
Right.
And, they have no reason to be embarrassed. In fact, they should be proud of the steps they've made to come as far as they have now. And to rectify something like this for the families, honestly, it's almost heroic at this point. So, that's what we always try to tell the agencies, sometimes that gets their attention, but sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes they still hold fast.
Yes.
So you mentioned that there were the two other cases that actually originally I was going to look into before I started on Mary Faye's case. Can you share a little bit, just a kind of a brief summary of what, I'm sure it's hard to summarize cases.
Really is.
But give us an idea of what the case was for Joyce Drake and Juanita. Is it Acker or Acker? Do you know?
Acker.
Acker.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, these two cases, Bob Hancock, he worked on all three of these cases. Actually, these became very personal to him, and really, years and years after them not being solved, he was the only one that was really looking to solve these cases. Like I said, there's no cold case unit in Morgan County, and they just don't have the money or the resources. They're so bogged down on all their current cases. So in defense of them, they just don't have time for it.
Yep.
Bob really, after retirement, he really kept at it. And I just felt like after learning about Mary Faye and getting the answers that I was looking for, and I felt like he was almost giving me these other two cases to look at because he knew he couldn't do it anymore.
Yeah.
He really wanted it to keep going. But after him, who's going to look at them?
Exactly, yeah.
So I almost felt obligated, but I also, some of that passion that he had, I think really rubbed off on me, because I really feel passionate about these two ladies. And when you read about their case and how everything went down, it's hard not to get just really emotional about the entire thing. And now starting with Juanita Acker, she came after Mary Faye, and then Joyce Drake would have been the third and the last one. But out of the three, Juanita Acker's case is really the least complicated. It's actually pretty straightforward, in my opinion. And I was able to get my hands on some case files. I won't say where I got them, but I will say that Bob also had copies of this, and I think it was around 15 to 20 pages. I still have them, but I think everything you need to know is in those pages. I think law enforcement, they pretty much knew what happened. But as far as evidence, they couldn't talk the district attorney into prosecuting a case after making an arrest. So after a certain amount of time, and you don't have the evidence, you're just going to drop it unless you get some sort of bombshell. But with Juanita Acker, at the time, she was staying in a motel because her house had caught on fire. They had this little small space heater that was a little bit defective, and it caught on fire, and they needed a place to stay. She was a widow. She had a teenage daughter, a teenage son, and then I think an 8-year-old daughter as well. So they all four stayed at a motel in Decatur. It was off Highway 31. And one night, she was alone in the motel. Someone came in, shot her in the head with 2 shots. And her 16-year-old daughter and her daughter's boyfriend found her there, and she was dead on the scene. So,
Wow.
that's how that happened. And at one point, and this is what Bob told me, one point in the investigation, they thought that the person that killed Mary Faye Hunter, Juanita Acker, and Joyce Drake might have been all the same person. They might have been all connected. But there's no way. I think all of these cases I've proven that they were each independent.
Okay.
That they were not connected whatsoever.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah. Now, as you also mentioned, Joyce Drake, I have been currently working on Joyce Drake, and it has been a roller coaster of a ride. I've been working on it since 2019, and I feel like I know what happened to Joyce. I feel like I know who did it, and in getting answers, I do think we have the answers. As far as making a prosecution, you're getting into the territory of, well, is the killer still alive or is he dead? And
Okay.
and without the killer, you can't make a prosecution. And if you don't have DNA, you don't have case files. Another one of those cases where you don't have DNA or case files,
Sure.
then no one's going to come forward and say, well, case closed, right?
Right.
So, but with Joyce it's a very unique case. She was 20 years old, a mother of 2. She had only been married about 2.5 years. She lived in a very small community right outside of Faulkville. She worked for her father at a little general store that he owned, and she was very, very well liked. She was attractive. She very popular. Went to church every Sunday. Just a very nice girl. Didn't have an enemy. That kind of thing. Just very shocking. Very what you would call a low risk victim, sort of like with
Sure.
Mary Faye, a very low risk victim, because both of these murders happened during the day, during the middle of the day, which is
Yeah.
unusual. The only thing that made Joyce somewhat of I would say a little bit higher than just a low risk victim was that she was doing, making runs to the bank for her father. She would take bank bag full of
Gotcha.
checks. She would have it converted to cash because they needed the cash at the store for the register. And it was a trip that she would make 2 to 3 times a week. And
So people would kind of know a routine if they paid attention.
right, if they were paying attention, and some of these trips to the bank, depending on the day of the week or the time of the month, she could be, bringing in somewhere between $300 to $2,500.
Sure. Oh, wow.
And
Yeah.
they were doing well. They were also selling a lot of gas at this station, and so yeah, someone was paying attention and they knew what to do, when to do it, and had the guts to try it. Sure, they could probably do pretty well. But her father, yeah, you could say maybe he was putting her in a risky situation. But you got to remember, this is 1970, very rural community. Everybody knew each other. That no one was getting murdered. In this community, he had no reason to think he was putting her in danger. But he would tell her, don't pick up anybody that you don't know. If you do, you have to come by the store and drop off the money before you go take them home. You don't need to be riding around in the truck with a bunch of money.
Right. Yeah.
And so they were mindful of that. They were careful. And she would do that, She would pick up people. And, back then, people would, if they saw somebody on the side of the road, they'd pick them up because they knew them. Let's say she drove by somebody and didn't pick them up. Well, that wouldn't look good on the store. It's like, hey, Joyce, why didn't you pick me up? That could be bad for business,
Mm-hmm.
And, it's a cold day. It's like 10 degrees outside. There's snow on the ground. But, it's just a different time.
Absolutely, yeah.
But she would not have picked up a stranger. And that they were sure of. So what you're left with is someone that she knew ends up killing her, but they also rob her because she's got $400 in a bank bag. And the thing is, they didn't just kill her. It was brutal. They stabbed her multiple times,
Wow.
slit her throat, and she ended up bleeding out. And then they dumped her body into a hollow off of this snowy embankment.
Right. Oh,
So
geez.
very brutal.
That is
But
very...
like I tell people, when you kill someone with a knife, it's not easy. You're gonna have to end up stabbing them usually a lot of times before you actually can kill them. So does that mean that it's is it a personal crime, or did it just take them a long time to do it? It's not always overkill. It's not always
Yeah.
personal.
You kind of... To me, it kind of depends on, well, I suppose, if you have an autopsy to see how they think it occurred. So, like if they killed her with a knife in a way, like if they had slit her throat first and then stabbed her all those times, that would probably be crime of passion. That, because there's no reason to continue once you do that with, the fatal blow first. So
most of the wounds actually were defensive wounds, and I have seen the autopsy report, which is interesting because I was able to see the autopsy report on Joyce Drake, but I haven't been able to see Mary Faye's autopsy report.
Yeah.
Share with them who I thought was responsible for her murder. So, they had a suspect, and I shared them. We were done meeting. I had changed their minds. They felt like, okay, well, never mind. I think you're on the right track. I think you know who did this, but again, without the evidence, without the original case files, and this is not a DNA case. We don't have DNA to test. Some people have said, why don't you just have her exhumed? Why don't you, check under her fingernails? Well, her fingernails were completely broken off.
Yeah.
And what
you obviously
was
fought hard,
very hard. And but this was an open casket funeral, believe it or not.
Oh, wow.
So they had cleaned her up really well. Any little debris or blood that was scraped off of her, and she was thoroughly clean. So I advised against that because I felt like you're going to be disturbing a grave and you're not going to get anything out of it. So I advised the family not to do that.
Yeah, really, the only reason I would say to do it is if you had DNA that you knew was available, both with her and otherwise. But yeah, that would be pretty traumatic for the family. So one of the things I found interesting about the book, and I think anybody who would read the book would feel this way, it's a little different style than what a normal, let's say, documentary style true crime case would be, because partly because you didn't have direct confirmation of some of the information.
Right.
So you're protecting people. So the style of it, how did you explain the style of the book a little bit to us so that people kind of understand?
Well, that's a great question, and something that hasn't been asked enough. Yeah, when you read the book, one of the first things you'll notice is you see a lot of interaction with Mary Faye and this romantic interest that she has, and there's no way that we could know what they were talking about. You know, the only way to know is if she had left behind a diary, or just something. Maybe that there were witnesses that overheard some of the things that was being said. But see, this is written in a novel type form. It's not written in sort of a traditional true crime format. So it's really what it is. It's a novel, and it's based on a true story. Now, that being said, there are a lot of case facts in this book, and I would say everything in it is based on facts of the case. Even the conversations that take place are still based on facts. It's all consistent with the narrative. Now, what we do know is that Mary Faye had a relationship with this man in the book. It's not his real name. In the book, he's called Adam Fletcher. His real name, I decided not to use because of his family. They're still out there. I don't want to embarrass anyone. I don't want to, put a bad name to anyone's family or anything taken in a negative connotation. What I wanted was the truth. That's what mattered to me. What happened, how it happened, why it's important. Why is it relevant? Why does Mary Faye Hunter's name, why is her story so important? And why should it be shared instead of being locked away and protected, like I think maybe the Decatur Police Department wanted to do?
Yeah.
But we'll get into that. But Mary Faye, there's a lot of interaction with her and this romantic interest, and the purpose of this book for me, I chose to write it this way because I wanted people to understand that, okay, Mary Faye, she made some poor choices. She made some decisions that a lot of people wouldn't have made in her position. And if you were to read a paragraph that summarized what happened in this case, you could quickly, have the opinion of, okay, well, this was a woman. She flirted with men. She dated a lot of different men. She slept around, and she got what was coming to her. That's sort of the impression you may get if you don't know who Mary Faye Hunter is. But the truth is, this was a woman that was placed on a high pedestal. She was involved in the church. Mary Faye was 34. She was a grown woman.
Yeah.
But she still lived at home.
Yeah.
And she was expected to be pristine and always, make the right decisions, the perfect decisions. Even the pastor at the church would often bring up her name in church. Let's everybody be more like Mary Faye. She played piano for the church. She played at many weddings, so she sort of had a front row seat to a life that she didn't feel like she was ever going to have.
Right. Yeah.
She was born with a cleft palate, which is, people are not familiar with that. There's an opening in the roof of your mouth when you have a cleft palate, and she had to wear a dental prosthetic in order to be able to speak normally, and even then, she sounded different, sort of a nasally type sound, and
Right.
and you have to have that to be able to eat.
And
That's the kind of thing you would have to wear back in the 60s.
I was going to say way back then, yeah.
Yeah, so she had some challenges, right from the get go, and on top of that, she had a limp because she was born like with one hip up higher than the other,
Right.
and she sort of had a very obvious, pronounced limp. So if you didn't know her and if you approached her and you had a conversation with her, you might think she's mentally challenged.
Mm.
And but once you get to know her, she's a very smart lady and she's talented. She's a talented piano player, and she had a pretty good job at a government-owned place.
Mm-hmm.
So she had never had a boyfriend. She was very timid, very self-conscious. So this doesn't sound like anything. Like if you read that little paragraph saying who you think this person is based on what happened, that's not what you would expect to read.
Exactly, yeah.
So that's what I wanted people to know. Why did she make the decisions that she made, and how it could easily happen to someone that had never had a boyfriend, that probably daydreamed about having one, getting married. She was 34 years old. She lived with her parents. She did everything for them. She ran errands for them. She pretty much dreamed of, having a husband, having kids. And, when you think about those things and on a daily basis, and then all of a sudden someone does show some interest in you, and it's never happened before. You've never been in a position to make bad choices. You've never been tempted. But then when you do make these choices, guess what happens? You don't know how to deal with it. People that have made mistakes in their life, they tend to get out of situations like that because they've got experience getting out of sticky situations. Well, she made a series of bad choices because she had never made any mistakes. She didn't know how to deal with it.
Mm-hmm. Well, and the odds are with most people, even if she had gone through and, the same situation, what are the odds that everything that happened to her was going to happen? I mean,
yeah, it really just all snowballed on her.
Mm-hmm.
It really did. And each and every decision that she made was she tried to correct the prior misstep. Like she thought, if I do this, then I can cover up that.
Mm-hmm.
And things just started piling up on her.
Yeah.
And nothing seemed to go the way she thought it would go.
Yep.
It was almost like it was just she was destined for doom. It's really a sad story, and I think when people read it, they'll realize this could have happened to anyone. Anyone in her situation. She didn't deserve what she got, and they will come away with it thinking, this poor lady, she just wanted love. She wanted the American dream, and you really can't blame her
Right.
for what happened to her. And that's what I wanted people to see. People, they hear rumors, and rumors are dirty, and they're not always accurate. Most of the time they're not. Sometimes they have a little bit of truth to them, but you don't get the whole story. And I just wanted people to get the whole story. There were some people in her family, they thought maybe Mary Faye, she wouldn't, if she had a say in it, she wouldn't want it to get out. Well, I don't think that's true. Not knowing Mary Faye, the kind of person she was, I think she would say, yeah, I think it should be told because this might save someone's life. Someone might read this story, and they may decide, you know what, there's other options. I don't need to go the way Mary Faye went,
Right. Right. Most people think of, these cases some generously will think of them as a person, but they don't really understand who the people are, other than that they're just an unfortunate cold case. But this
Yes.
really, gives her personality, makes people understand who she was as a person. And, that, like you said, this could have happened to anybody else in a similar situation to hers. So,
And I have to give Glenda Yarbrough a lot of credit for developing Mary Faye's character.
mhm.
We did speak to some people that remembered Mary Faye, which wasn't easy to do.
I was going to ask about that, how many people you were actually able to talk to in her life. Yeah.
Yeah, there wasn't that many, but there was enough to sort of to get an idea, of the values, and some of the people that rode in her carpool and that worked with her. They all painted sort of the same picture. And
hmm
now, she wasn't very social. She was very self-conscious, so there wasn't a whole lot of people. She didn't go out. She didn't you know, she didn't have a driver's license, so she didn't go off on her own unless she was just going to go out and walk.
hmm
But yeah, Glenda did an excellent job, and she did exactly what I was hoping she'd be able to do. And when we had some book signings, and there were some people that came that did know Mary Faye, and they confirmed that. Yes, Glenda did an excellent job of, bringing Mary Faye to life. They said that's the Mary Faye that we knew.
That's great. That's
So
wonderful.
it's excellent. I was very pleased with that.
Yeah. So, I think there are a few theories out there of what could have happened, but you pretty much nailed what you think probably happened to her. And given the relationship that she had and her standing with the community and all of these things, how did you kind of uncover some solid information that would, I mean, I know that probably Bob had a lot to do with that, but where did you come to the conclusion of what you think happened to her?
Well, yeah, I'm glad you mentioned Bob. Without Bob, we couldn't have done it.
Mm-hmm.
And that is, it was very much a team effort. And without Bob's the facts that he knew and the information that he was able to get, there was one piece of information. Like I said, there was an article that was written, I believe it was in 2011, and this led to a big break in the case. Now this break was never brought into the media. Bob he held on to it because he didn't feel like he could prove anything, right? So he didn't. It was, unless you can prove something, it's just really another rumor, right? You've got to have at least a couple of sources to back it up before you put it out there. It's sort of the rule of thumb. But he did have someone, after reading that article, and really the article, it was just an update on the case. In other words, they talked about Mary Faye Hunter. They mentioned Juanita Acker. They mentioned Joyce Drake. So really, the focus was on those three unsolved cases, and that Bob was still looking at them. And if anybody had any information, they could call this number. And that's exactly what happened. Someone saw the article. They called in, and they mentioned to Bob that there was a note, a suicide note left by a man that, as we would later find out, was Mary Faye's boss at Redstone Arsenal.
Gotcha.
And he took his own life. Now remember, Mary Faye, her body was found in October of 1967. This man took his life in March of 68. So
Okay.
it was a few months after that. But he had written a note, and there's evidence of this. This was actually written about in a newspaper article. When he went missing, the Decatur Daily had written a series of articles about this. First, he went missing. They were looking for him for a couple of days. They found his vehicle. It was it mentions the Wheeler Wildlife Refuge, but it wasn't in the exact place that Mary Faye was found. It was in on a different side of Wheeler Wildlife, but they found his car, and it was close to a little slough, the backwaters of the Tennessee River, and they had the waters dragged by the Flint rescue squad. So they came out, and it didn't take them long before they were able to find his body in the water. And he had left a note in the car detailing why he decided to take his life. And they found, and this is all in the newspaper article, they found an empty bottle. They wouldn't say exactly what kind of pills were supposed to be in the bottle, but they clearly mentioned that this man had taken his own life. That was the speculation, and they even went so far as to go into detail about how he did it. They said he went out on this fallen tree. And whenever you go out to the river and you look at the tree line, you'll notice a lot of trees. They end up falling over. But the wind blows them down after they die or whatever. But you see them a lot. They'll fall over into the water, and you can just if you want to, you can go out there and walk out on these fallen trees. And some people will walk out on them and sit on the edge of the tree and they'll fish.
Right.
And they thought that he had taken these pills, went out onto this fallen tree, waited to pass out, and then he would fall into the water and drown. And
Well,
they said this in the article itself.
yeah.
Now, what makes this even more interesting is that they came back later on in a very small article. I don't know if you've seen it, but they come back and say that they decided it was just an accidental drowning.
I think I did see that. Yeah.
Just out of the blue, they just said this is accidental, not a suicide. And I know why they did it, because if it had been a suicide, then his wife, he was married, he had 2 sons, they wouldn't be able to collect on the life insurance. So it was sort of a nice thing to do by the police and by the coroner to say, you know what, we could just say that this was accidental, and this poor woman, she needs the money, and she did. Yeah, she did. So she would get the money, and probably deserved a lot more than just that. But the only problem is, with ruling this an accident, you have to sort of take what's in that suicide note and just trash it. Because you've said, okay, well, this is not a suicide. This is an accidental drowning. So we've got to get rid of this note, because with the note, then that changes the whole narrative as far as a insurance payout and all this. But this woman that called Bob to give this tip, she said that she knew about the note, that she had seen the note, and Bob said, well, why didn't you turn it over to police? And she said, well, we tried to. we tried to give it to the police, but they didn't want to have nothing to do with it. So
Well, yeah.
what happened to it, we don't know. But I asked Bob about 100 questions about it. I said, well, who was this lady? Did she leave her name? And he said, oh, I can't remember it. And it seems like it'd be a name that I could remember. And I just couldn't remember it, and I almost had the feeling that he didn't want to tell me because he knew I was going to look into it. And I felt like he was maybe trying to protect me a little bit. And that's the feeling that I got. And I said, okay, well, I'm going to look into this on my own. But he did give me enough information. He probably didn't think he had, but he said, well, this woman, she said she worked at Goodyear. I said, well, okay. Well, I took that information, and it took me a while, but I found that this man that I felt that had killed Mary Faye, his ex-wife and his daughter, they had both worked at Goodyear. And it looked like to me that his daughter was probably the most likely person that would have called Bob. She did work at Goodyear. She would have known what was in the note because the man that killed Mary Faye, his name was either mentioned in the note or
okay.
He knew about it because he worked at the ambulance company that
Right.
they were all, affiliated with the police, and some of his best friends worked at the police department.
Yeah.
So he would have either seen the note personally or they would have said, hey, look, your name is mentioned in this note, and he would have gotten that information, and he probably would have told his wife. And but anyway, the woman that called Bob went on to say, well, yeah, it looks like this was Mary Faye's boyfriend. He admitted to that. He admitted that she had an abortion because he got her pregnant, and the whole thing was botched. They took her to see this black lady that was in Florence that was doing abortions. That they were. It looks like she was trying to pin this whole thing on a fictitious black lady. I looked into that, couldn't find any information about that, and but I think this whole story that she made up to Bob was partially true, but I think she was trying to take him off the scent as far as who actually did the abortion.
Right.
And if you go back and watch this movie from 1967, it's called In the Heat of the Night, and there's a scene where there's a black lady that's trying to do an abortion for a white woman, and I think that's where they got the idea to say it was a black woman that did the abortion for Mary Faye.
Yeah. It's funny. I have actually seen that movie. It's been a really long time, but I've actually seen that movie. And as soon as you started to say, oh, if you go back, I was like, hey, I think I know a movie back then. So wow.
So I noticed that this woman that I think was the one that talked to Bob, she actually was a member of the Mary Faye Hunter group that I created on Facebook.
Right.
And I contacted her and I said, have you ever talked to a guy named Bob Hancock? And she said, oh, Bob Hancock, well, I'm not sure. I don't know. And I said, so I decided just to be proactive about it and act like I know more than I did. I said, look, I know you talked to Bob. I know you told him about the note. And then all of a sudden she gets, she's like, I'm so sorry about what happened to Mary Faye. I'm sorry about what my father did. Yeah. She pretty much admits without actually saying it directly.
Right.
that
Yeah.
she
Well,
talked to him, and then she went on to say that she didn't, she didn't have anything to do with her father, and her father wasn't a good man, and but yeah, she was sorry about everything, but she just didn't go into detail, and I wanted her, to put that in writing. I wanted to use this as evidence. And of course, I did take some screenshots of the conversation.
I was going to say, I hope that you at least save that
I
because a
did.
lot of people delete their stuff and they know that people are watching.
Right, and it's a good thing I did, because she later on started making some comments on some of the posts in Mary Faye's group. She just completely went back on what she said, um and I think it's because some of her family members maybe put some pressure on her, when once they found out she was giving out all this information. So
Right.
but that's okay. I
Yeah.
mean, if she wants to go back on what she said, that's fine. I don't really care about that. I just know what she told me.
Sure. Yeah.
So they knew what was in that note. That they knew what happened. They knew who really did that abortion, and it really didn't. It didn't make sense for Mary Faye to go to Florence to see someone to do an abortion, because she had to be back home by noon.
Mm-hmm.
She did her hair every. She had a standing appointment every Saturday at 10:30 in the morning. She went to the House of Beauty. She had her hair done, which in the 60s is a big thing. I mean, that's just
Right.
what you did. You put your hair up, big hair. It had to be professionally done. So this was something her mother would have expected her to do. So she had to get her hair done, but it was also the perfect time to also, meet someone, get the abortion done. It would probably take 20, 30 minutes, and then
Mm-hmm.
she could be back home. That's what she was led to believe by this man, that she would have known, because she went to high school with this man.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
were the same age. They would have been the same graduation class.
Right.
So she probably felt like, okay, well, we know this guy. In fact, his father actually worked with Mary Faye's father when they were younger. They both worked at this hosiery plant together. So they
Right.
probably knew each other too.
Wow.
So there's just a lot. Yeah, there's a lot of information I was able to get. So yeah, Mary Faye, she wouldn't have gone to Florence, because, as you know, well, people that live around here, they know a trip from Decatur to Florence would take at least an hour to
Right.
drive there, and then an hour back.
So she would
So,
have to arrange to have somebody get her there because she doesn't drive.
right. But if she did the abortion in town, she could get back in time. Um, and even if she was a few minutes late, that would be okay.
Right.
But once, she was an hour late, her mother was already, looking down the streets, calling her husband, saying, Mary Faye's not back,
Right.
completely out of character for her. And, about 2 o'clock that afternoon, they were already getting the police involved on this
Yeah.
entire thing.
And it kind of lends to who she was because, I mean, even back then, even as worried as her parents were, you don't get the attention of police even then that quickly usually. So,
Yeah.
for them, I mean, the way you made it kind of appear in the book, and I don't know if there's any factual commentary on that, but it sounded like the way it was presented that they didn't even well, it's only been 2 hours? Are you kidding me? You want me to do a missing persons report on this type of a thing? And that was what I was
Yeah.
thinking. I was like, wow, they really got on it quick. And
Well, they did actually. They did.
yeah,
And I actually spoke to the guy that was on patrol. He ended up later being chief of police in Decatur,
Oh, nice.
And he was one of the few survivors who was still around to tell some stories. But yeah, his name was Frank Schaefer, and he was he was actually very good friends with the killer as well. Because remember, this guy owned an ambulance company in town, and he also owned several other businesses. So, yeah, he was friends with law enforcement. He would also use his ambulances to smuggle alcohol, which was a big deal, with prohibition.
Yeah.
That was a lot of that was going on. If you didn't have a whiskey still or something like that, you were you were smuggling alcohol. That's what people did. And he would actually bring in alcohol to the police department and let them have their pick of it. Like, here you
Oh,
go,
wow.
and they'd sit around and drink together.
Oh.
And these are real stories that I was able
Yeah.
to get from people that by this day and time they don't really care who knows, but they're like,
Right.
yeah, we used to put beer in the vending machines. Instead of having Coke, we would put beer. So if you just hit the button, a beer would come out instead of a Coke, you know.
Yeah.
So they were all friends. They all covered for each other. They all knew stuff on each other. So they kind of had to take care of each other, kind of well, I won't tell if you won't tell, this kind of thing was, small town, the smaller the town, bigger the secrets. That's just the way it is.
Wow. So I just happened to, I was pulling up the What Happened to Mary Faye Hunter Facebook page, and the first, they never show up. The pictures and the posts never show up in the right order. So the very
Right.
first thing it pulled up was a picture of an ambulance that James posted. A very old ambulance, and this was from 2019, it looks like, but saying big news coming very soon. And I'm assuming that had a lot to do with what you guys were discussing. But
Yeah.
do you know, is that actually the ambulance?
No, I don't. No,
Okay.
I don't think that could have been the actual ambulance, but it would have been probably the same make and model. I would
Okay.
imagine.
I was going to say it was pretty beat up looking, but I kind of got the impression from the book that maybe the ambulance had been destroyed.
I would say it was either someone might have bought it, maybe another company bought it. It probably ended up in a junkyard.
Gotcha.
I wouldn't see any reason why anybody would keep it.
Gotcha.
The man that did this to Mary Faye, he got arrested.
Yeah.
In 68, 69, and 70 for abortions that nearly killed these other women. Now they survived. Mary Faye didn't. And but the difference is, there might have been some damage done, but he didn't personally kill them with his own hands. He let them go.
Yeah.
Yeah, he did an abortion on a 15-year-old girl, and they were able to find the fetus. He put the fetus, and this is true. This is in the report. He put the fetus in a milk carton and then put it in a brown paper sack, and he dumped it.
Terrible.
Well, guess where he dumped it? Same place Mary Faye was found.
Oh my. Oh, huh. Interesting.
So I'm willing to bet that a lot of the abortions that he did, he sort of used this as a dumping ground. So I couldn't tell you how many he did. I mean, he got away with doing so many, but he probably took Mary Faye to this very location when he killed her and dumped her because he knew it. He knew the place very well, and that's where you're going to go. That's where killers go.
Huh.
They go where they know.
Yeah, well, that's true. Yeah. Gosh, we could probably go all afternoon on this or all evening on this, but where can people find your work? And maybe share the Facebook page with us?
Yeah, well, there's a Facebook page. It's sort of a hub. It's like for all three cases, and it's called the Morgan County 3. Now there's that's the actual page. And then from that page, you'll see 3 groups attached to this one page.
Okay.
And I'm the admin for all 3 of those and for the actual page. So you have the official page, Morgan County 3, and then you have the 3 groups of you've got what happened to Mary Faye Hunter, who shot Juanita Acker, and who killed Joyce Drake. I try to keep these groups private for people that are interested. There are some cases people want to share certain things from the group to put information out there. I'm okay as long as they don't use certain real names, and I don't want people to families to get dragged into this stuff.
Right. Yeah. Now, do you also have a personal website like for your other work, or is this pretty much your dedicated work at this for now?
Yeah, I just sort of I use that for everything. And I mean,
Okay.
I do have a YouTube channel that's got some of my unrelated work and
Okay.
personal work, but it's also got some videos and interviews that I've done on some of these cases. The short documentary that we did on the 2 young girls that found Mary Faye's remains.
Right.
I believe that one's about 15 minutes long, and what we used to just exclusively show that on Facebook, and it amazingly it just took off and had like 30,000 something views.
Right.
And then eventually we ended up putting it on YouTube, and it's gotten a few hits after that. But I recommend people watch that because in the newspaper it tells you a little bit of a different story. It says that these girls are not even mentioned. It's just the grandparents, and I think they were trying to protect the girls. They didn't want to put them out there. But it was really the 2 little girls that found the remains, and these were 2 of the nicest people I've ever met. These 2 women they're just amazing people, and
Right.
they tell the story so well.
Yeah. That was
And
Kim and Connie, right?
Kim and Connie Hauser,
Right.
and just they remembered it like it was yesterday. I mean, it was amazing.
Yeah.
And they really they really give you a good idea of the way things were back then, and
Yeah.
and some of the stress that poor family went through because they were getting threats from who I think killed Mary Faye. He was trying to get all this information to die down because I think he was afraid they might have known more than what they really knew.
Yeah.
So I definitely recommend that video.
Great. And that's Finding Mary Faye Hunter, the real story, right?
Yeah, and you can
Okay.
see that on Facebook if you type it in, or you
Okay.
can go to YouTube and type that in
Great.
under Golson Custom Video. That's my YouTube channel name.
Okay. Very good. I also see that you have one from Paula Hearst interview.
Yeah, and that's a good interview as well. And Paula was a wealth of information. She was able to provide a really good link from Mary Faye and her boss. And now how Paula's connected to this is her father was in Mary Faye's carpool. He was also worked in the same department with Mary Faye. She worked
Okay.
at Redstone Arsenal in the U.S. Army Missile Command building, and her boss, being her love interest, he was put in charge of that department. What Mary Faye did was she was a shipping clerk, typist. She archived information. And Mary Faye, like I said, she was very quiet, timid, didn't really talk to anyone. I mean, she did talk to people in the carpool, but she knew them really well.
Mm-hmm.
But people at work, she didn't talk to. But people from the carpool, they started noticing that Mary Faye and this man, that they were often seen together, walking around together, talking, laughing, smiling. So that stood out because that just that just didn't happen with Mary Faye.
Right.
And Paul was able to shed some light on that, what her father had witnessed, and what, the information that he had relayed from that. And then, of course, after this man ended up taking his own life, you start putting two and two together.
Yeah.
And that's kind of a short amount of time between those two. You go from 1967, a few months later, and this man that just happened to be working in the same department with Mary Faye, now he is deceased. So
Yeah. That's very sad. It's very well conveyed in the book, but just knowing the information, people think things like this can't happen to them,
right.
but it kind of goes to show that you don't know what in your life is going to make you make a choice that you thought you would never make. And this is for somebody as maybe as innocent as she was, or naive maybe is a better word. Then you add that factor in, and you just never know what life is going to hand you and what decisions people are going to make along the way. It's not necessarily meaning that it's nefarious or that it's, they're a bad person. It just means that something happened and they made a bad decision. And unfortunately, consequences happen,
Yeah, I think you're dead on with that. It's really easy to, sort of look down your nose at people when they make some, decisions in their life and say, well, I would never do that. I just can't imagine why you would make a decision like that. But I think those type of people, and I think we're all kind of guilty of that, about some things. I mean, we are, but when you read the book, I think you might question yourself after reading it, and it may help you whenever you come across another similar situation where you have the opportunity to look down on someone and say, "Oh, well, I wouldn't do that." Well, maybe you need to stop and just pause and realize, well, I don't have all the information, and I really can't say anything until I've walked in this person's shoes.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I think once you read the book and you've walked in Mary Faye's shoes, then you really feel the pain, And the hardest thing for me, when me and Glenda were working on the scene where she died, was actually going through with it, because because we knew what was going to happen. We knew what had to happen. We knew the story. We knew
Yeah.
the truth. But it was really hard to just go ahead and write that as it happened. It's almost like, well, wait a minute, we have the power. Well, we can change this. She doesn't have to die.
Yeah.
You have that split second, where it's like, we can change this, but it was really hard.
Wouldn't
It
it be magic if that's what we could do?
really would be. But we were able to get a lot of details about what happened to her from the man that was with the killer that day. When he made a confession,
Mm-hmm.
and everything he said, it made sense and it checked out, and it really painted a picture for us. It was horrific how it went down, and it was very sad and tragic. That scene, it's really tough to read. Especially it comes at a time where you feel like you get to the end of the book, and it seems like, okay, the book is over, and then there's like two or three more chapters where you actually find out what happened to her.
Yeah. Yeah.
It comes at you surprised. It's sort of like a shock.
It really does, because, you don't hear that, especially when you're reading a book somewhat like this about any kind of a true crime case, so to say. And, there's either one of two things. One, it's usually about a highly sensationalized murder where everybody knows what happened and it's not a surprise when you read it. Or it's about a case something like this, but nobody knows what happened. They just know that she died, and that's kind of how it ends. So like you get to that chapter that's not quite the end of the book, like you were saying, and you know the end of the story, but you don't really know the end of the story. So this is kind of unique that you maybe you can't say with 100% certainty, but you can pretty much say what happened. And, you know, to be able to tell the story and to know what happened. And it really was, I can speak personally, I thought it was very, I can imagine after all the research and kind of the personal connection that you had to it, how it might have been difficult to write and even read it afterwards, just to go back and see that on paper, you know, so to say. It was a difficult read in a lot of ways, because you almost are rooting for her. You almost want to say, oh no, this isn't going to happen, type of a thing, and you don't know the details until you know the details. So
and I appreciate the kind words and what you've had to say about that. And you also made an interesting point about this is what we think happened. It's hard to say for 100% exactly how it went down, because I think we're all conditioned to think unless you have DNA, you don't really know who did it.
Mm-hmm.
That's sort of how we're conditioned to think nowadays.
It is kind of a weird thing. And, you want to say, well, yes, it's really great. It's one of our best tools now. And it is, it's a really great tool, and we're coming a long way with it. But, you'll speak to any law enforcement people and they'll say it's all part of the package. It's not what proves, usually is not what proves, what happened. It's just part of the package that helps prove what happened.
Yeah, so there's a lot of cases that are still being solved without it.
Absolutely.
But cold cases are almost impossible to close without DNA. I mean, you just won't see them anymore. A case that's at least 10 years old, it's if you see that it's been solved recently, it's going to be because of a DNA swab, they're going to retest the evidence, which will be a lot easier nowadays because they're going to hold on to this stuff.
Yeah.
They're not going to lose it like they would, back in the 60s.
Yep.
And that's a good thing. That's great. But DNA, it can only tell you so much. It's not going to tell you, exactly how it happened, what happened. If you're lucky, if you get the right guy, the DNA matches, maybe he'll tell you what happened.
If he's alive.
Yeah, if he's alive, in a lot of cases they're not. So you still, there's that investigation side of it that you have to, you really have to dig and deep to find these things, and you got to hope that some of these people will come forward. And with this particular case, they did. Not everybody, but just enough people came forward to really piece this thing together.
Yeah. Yep. Well, and I know that Jamie appreciates it, and certainly, groups like ours, those who are really looking for the truth in the case, the life of these people. It's good to see answers given. And since Jamie, other than, I guess, some very distant relatives such as yourself, Jamie's really the only one left, correct? That's really close to the family?
Well, he does have two half-sisters.
Okay.
So I'm sorry, three half-sisters, I believe, and I think all three of them are still around. Last time I checked, They're still doing okay.
Good.
But they were not, actively, looking for answers. I'm sure they're appreciative, but
sure.
But yes, one thing I would like to add to this is that a lot of people have continued to ask about the film that Jamie, and that's sort of how this whole thing got started. And
I was going to mention that earlier, and I kind of bypassed that. Thanks for bringing that back up.
Right. A lot of people keep asking, when is this film going to be released? Well, it's, I don't know anything about the film industry. I've worked in television. Those are two different things. He's tried to raise money because he wants it done right. If he wanted to today, he could go out and make this movie on a low budget, but it wouldn't be done the way he wants it done. If it's going to be done, he wants it done right. He wants it to look really good. He hasn't been able to generate enough funding to do this film as of yet, but who knows? If we get enough attention from really good podcasts like yours, we continue to do this. You never know. I think one day it's still very much a possibility. We're still trying. We're still trying to get answers. We're still trying to get our hands on the autopsy report. Scott Anderson, Morgan County District Attorney, he's done a good job. And I credit him for admitting that the case files have been lost. No one knows where they are. That was actually big of him to say that, because a lot of people, would have just ignored it. But he admitted it, and but he's sort of using that against us, because if that's the only thing we have left, as far as we don't have case files, we don't have evidence, but we do have an autopsy report. And if there ever was a confession made, which we know that it's not going to be a confession, this man's dead. But Scott, he doesn't know that, so he's like, we've got to have something. So we've got to protect the integrity of the autopsy report. There could be something in there that only the killer would know. But what would that be? I mean, we're talking about skeletal remains. Why do we want it so bad? Because it's evidence. Because it's Mary Faye. Anything Mary Faye related, we want it. We feel like we're entitled to have it.
Right.
And you know what? Just because we look at it doesn't mean we're going to make it public. If he wants to, we can sit down, we can look at it, and we don't have to have a copy of it or nothing. We just want to see it. That's it.
Yeah.
And a lot of places will do that,
That's true. That is true. Yeah.
But so far, he keeps ignoring, Jamie. Every now and then, Jamie will come back and try to contact him, and he won't get back with him. I know he's busy, but maybe one day.
Yeah.
And that'll be great. And that'll be one more thing, that we can look at in this case, that we feel like, okay, that's the last stone, that we can turn over and look at.
Right. Well, you've done a great job for sure of getting as much information, more information than anybody else has, it sounds like, between you and Bob. And
I appreciate that.
So, yeah, I'm sure that Jamie appreciates it as well. So that's really awesome.
I appreciate that. And like I said, it's not a case that a lot of people, a lot of podcasts want to cover. I've reached out to other podcasts, and
well, I guess maybe I was naive enough to just go ahead and jump in with both feet.
They don't know what to do with cases like this, I don't think.
Yeah. Really, honestly, we're right with you, where we just want to share the case, let people know what happened.
Right.
If they have any information, for heaven's sake, come forward. It looks like the State Bureau of Investigation might be the place that actually will have the information. Who knows? It could be Morgan County DA, but whoever, just come forward. And we now have a dedicated tip line as well. So, if anybody wants to come forward and talk about that with us, we can get the information to the right place. And
we can all hold out hope that maybe I'll get a phone call one day, or Jamie will get a phone call and it says, "Hey, guess what? We found all the evidence." And we have some of the physical evidence. It can be tested too. Why not?
Right.
I mean, Do I think that'll happen? Well, let's say they did find it. Well, what are they going to do with it once they find it? That's the question. Are they going to tell anybody that they found it? If they do, then well, then they're going to have to admit that they covered up a suicide.
Yeah.
But of course, does it really matter now?
Yeah.
That happened in '68.
Mm-hmm.
So I know this man's wife she recently passed away, so it's not going to affect her. I've
Yeah.
spoken with this man's family, and
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's going to hurt anybody to know the truth. Whether
Yeah.
something was cover up back then or not. If they find it, they need to report it.
Yep. Well, that's what we always say. If you know something, say something. So,
Yeah, I mean, just the truth still matters to some people. It
mhm.
matters to me. It doesn't matter if I get the credit or not. It doesn't matter. I just want to know what happened.
Yeah.
And if I'm wrong, it doesn't matter. Yeah, if they find all this stuff and it turns out, hey, there was a woman in Florence that was doing these abortions, or Mary Faye didn't have an abortion.
Yeah.
I don't think that's possible. I think she did,
Mm-hmm.
but let's say there's something that goes against what I feel like happened, what I know that happened. I'll be the first one out there, and I'll say, "Look, I was wrong. This is what happened."
Yep. Yep.
'Cause I want everybody to know now.
Yeah.
I
Well,
don't
I think
care.
I think above everything, um, other than possibly just the family who does want to know, Jamie
Jamie, yeah,
particularly, but really Mary Faye deserves to have the truth.
yeah, and she's had her voice heard, I think, and um, like I said, Glenn did an excellent job of
Hmm.
that.
Agreed.
I think people know what Mary Faye went through, why she made the choices that she made, and she's not just a rumor. She's not just a photograph
Hmm.
from a newspaper. There's a lot more to her, and I think in a lot of ways, she followed her heart. It led to a series of things that it really led to her undoing. But I do think she found love. Unfortunately, it didn't last. But would she have made the same decisions if she knew what was going to happen? She would have handled it differently, of
Sure.
course.
Yeah.
But it would have been interesting to see if the abortion had been successful, what would have happened? Would she have ended up with this man? Would they have ended up getting married, having their own family? I like to think they would have, because I know this man was in a marriage that was unstable. His wife was, people from that family. They told me she was not a good person. She was a manipulator. She didn't do him well. He was having some psychological problems that she didn't know how to deal with.
Yeah.
Mary Faye apparently was very compassionate and was the right kind of person that she knew how to deal with that. She was, she went through a lot of issues in her life to where she could be sensitive to those type of things. And I think they were sort of a crutch for each other. They were good for each other. They made each other feel good.
Right.
That's what they needed. They found each other.
So I think you did a great job of bringing her to life. Really, is what I think you did with the book.
Well, all right. Thank you so much. And I know you guys are professional and you do a good job. And I've been impressed with everything that y'all have done. I've been following y'all, from the beginning.
That's awesome. I appreciate that so much. But yeah, it has been a great conversation. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you so much again. And you have a good evening.
If you believe you have any information on Mary Faye Hunter's case, or also for Joyce Drake or Juanita Acker, please come forward. As we always say, no information is too small, and even if you think the investigators already know, it's important to report that information. So many cases where it's been several years, some that it hasn't even been several years, records might have been lost, just like in Mary Faye's case, or even just overlooked information could be in the file, and that will just call attention to it. You can submit tips on our website at alcoldcase.com, or you can call in to our tip line at 251-501-COLD or 2653. Or you may contact authorities directly at one of the following: the Decatur Police Department at 256-341-4635, or Morgan County Sheriff's Department at 256-301-1174.
Since Alabama Cold Case Advocacy's creation, we have dedicated innumerable hours to researching and networking in an effort to provide the largest platform we can to the cases we share. We shoulder all associated expenses with Alabama Cold Case Advocacy out of our own pocket, including the subscription fees for researching and production of the Unforgotten podcast, to provide a cost-free avenue for the victims' families of those cases.
We hope you will join in our efforts to raise awareness of Alabama's missing and murdered and support these families who have been forced to carry the immeasurable loss of their loved ones and the fight for answers. If you appreciate our mission and you are inspired to make a donation, your extra support will enable the ACCA to continue our research, share the cold cases, and help those families know that they are also unforgotten.
Unforgotten is an Alabama cold case advocacy podcast, recorded in conjunction with Riverside FM, hosted and distributed by Red Circle to your favorite podcast platforms. Content, research, artwork, and production are by Sellers and Stormy of Alabama Cold Case Advocacy. Credits for music, sound clips, special mentions, and research sources can be found in each episode's description. Your support helps us continue producing Unforgotten and further Alabama Cold Case's mission of advocacy and awareness. There are a few ways you can help us light the path. Make a one-time or monthly donation to Unforgotten through Red Circle, sign up for a one-time or recurring donation through the ACCA website, or subscribe to the Unforgotten Patreon channel for early access to ad-free episodes. You will find the links for all three in our episode descriptions. Another cost-free way to be of great help is to follow us on social media, but most importantly, whatever you do, tell everyone you know about these cases. Sharing their stories is one of the most effective ways to help find resolution for Alabama's cold cases. Be the spark. Thank you for listening, and until next time, remember, justice may be delayed, but the victims and their families remain unforgotten.
That was good. You did good on that one.
Thanks.
This podcast is sponsored by IQ Bar.
I've got good news and bad news. Here's the bad news. Most protein bars are packed with sugar and unpronounceable ingredients. The good news? There's a better option. I'm Will, and I created IQ Bar plant protein bars to empower doers like you with clean, delicious, low-sugar brain and body fuel. IQ Bars are packed with 12 grams of protein, brain nutrients like magnesium and lion's mane, and zero weird stuff. And right now, you can get 20% off all IQ Bar products, plus free shipping. Try our delicious IQ Bar sampler pack with 7 plant protein bars, 4 hydration mixes, and 4 enhanced coffee sticks. Clean ingredients, amazing taste, and you'll love how you feel. Refuel smarter, hydrate harder, caffeinate larger with IQ Bar.
Go to eatiqbar.com and enter code BAR20 to get 20% off all IQ Bar products, plus free shipping. Again, go to eatiqbar.com and enter code BAR20.
Americans love using their credit cards, the most secure and hassle-free way to pay. But D.C. politicians want to change that with the Durbin-Marshall credit card bill. This bill lets corporate megastores pick how your credit card is processed, allowing them to use untested payment networks that jeopardize your data security and rewards. Corporate megastores will make more money, and you pay the price. Tell Congress to guard your card, because Americans lose when politicians choose. Learn more at guardyourcard.com.
The Jeep brand has always stood for American freedom. Now with our Freedom of Choice pricing program, you can choose your offer. cash incentives, or employee pricing for all. Hurry into your local dealer today for details. Jeep, there's only one. Offer valid on select 2024 and 2025 Jeep brand vehicles for non-FCA employees and retirees. $200 admin fee applies. Not all buyers and lessees will qualify. Restrictions apply. Not combinable with other offers. Ends 4/30/2025. Jeep is a registered trademark of FCA US LLC.